Do you feel lost, like you've wandered into a dense, shadowed wood, unsure of the path forward? Do distractions pull you from the still, small voice, leaving your soul restless and searching? Have you felt the weight of silence and wondered if God has left you alone? Here on the Distracted Christian Podcast, we walk that dark night together. Every step draws us closer to the one who's been waiting. His love is the light that guides, His grace, the compass that never fails. The sun hangs low over the hills, bleeding gold through the dust-thick air. The temple stones are warm under his feet, but the man doesn't notice. His chin is high, his lips move with the rhythm of a well-rehearsed prayer. His voice, smooth, steady, certain, fills the space like incense curling towards heaven. God, I thank you that I am not like other men. Nearby, another man kneels in the shadows, his forehead rests against the cold floor, fingers trembling, curling in the dust. The words barely make it past his lips, raw, broken, almost lost in the hush of the temple. God, have mercy on me, a sinner. 2 men, 2 prayers, and one walks away right with God. Pride is a quiet thing, creeping like ivy up the walls of your soul, tangling its roots into what should be holy ground. It isn't loud, at least not always. Sometimes it's just a flicker of satisfaction when your Bible is more marked up than in someone else's. The way your hands stay clean while others fumble in their sin. The way your voice carries in prayer, strong, certain, while others stumble. Welcome to the Distracted Christian Podcast. I'm Nate Labadorf, and today we're talking about something that slips into all of us, spiritual pride. That thing that makes the Pharisee stand tall. That feeling when you measure your holiness and the reflection of other people's failures. We're going to step into the dim quarters of the dark night of the soul, where John of the Cross peels back the layers of the hidden sin, how it grows, how it deceives, and how it keeps us far from God while making us feel very near to Him. It's not an easy road, but it is a necessary one. The fire of refinement burns, but it purifies. Pride doesn't come with horns and a sneer, at least not always. It comes wrapped in devotion and zeal and the glow of good intentions turned to other people. It wears the scent of prayer, the shape of discipline, the sound of praise, but underneath, it whispers, see me, admire me, call me holy. And the devil, well, he'll feed it. He'll keep it warm and he'll let that thing grow. So before we dig into St. John of the Cross, let's sit for a moment in this quiet question. When you pray, when you study, when you serve, are you reaching for the hands of God? Or are you waiting for someone to see how high you can stretch? And that's where we'll begin. St. John of the Cross, writing in The Dark Night of the Soul, describes this pride not as a sudden fall, but as a slow, almost invisible shift, a transformation of holy fervor into self-satisfaction. It is the quiet moment when prayer is no longer about talking with God, but about feeling pious. When a fast is no longer about surrender, but proving devotion. When a heart once burning for God now smolders with the need to be recognized for its own holiness. From this prosperity, St. John writes, there often comes to them, through their imperfections, a certain kind of secret pride, whence they come to have some degree of satisfaction with their works and with themselves. The greatest danger of spiritual pride is that it wears the mask of virtue. It appears in the form of discipline, devotion, and religious fervor, deceiving even the person in its snares. Consider the Pharisee in Luke 18, standing in the temple, eyes lifted up in self-assurance. God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithe of all that I possess. He is not pleading for grace, but proclaiming his own superiority. His words, though cloaked in gratitude, are poisoned with comparison. Meanwhile, in the shadows, the tax collector stands with his head bowed, whispered only the only prayer that matters most. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. St. John warns that this same dynamic plays out in the souls of the proud. They measure their own worth by outward acts of devotion, and they condemn those who do not match their own standards. St. John adapts the words of Jesus, "They behold the mote in their brother's eyes and not consider the beam that is in their own." And this pride is not just static, it grows. As St. John says again, the devil often increases the fervor that they have, so that their pride and presumption may grow greater. They become more zealous in their prayers, more rigorous in their fasting, more fluent in their religious speech, not to glorify God, but to build a fortress of righteousness around themselves. Even in John's tradition, the Catholic Church, in confession, which was meant to be a great act of humility, that also becomes another tool for this self-protection. St. John describes how these souls palliate their sins and make them appear less evil, so that they do not have to face the full weight of their imperfections. They seek out confessors who will admire them rather than challenge them. Their grief over sin is not because they have wounded God's heart, but because their failings have shattered the illusion of spiritual greatness. But the truly humble, those who have learned to kneel low, do not seek admiration. St. John describes them this way. They realize how much God deserves of them, or how much they owe to God, and how little is all that they do for His sake, and thus the more that they do, the less are they satisfied. They rejoice when others are praised. They grieve over their own shortcomings, not with despair, but with love for God. They are broken vessels, open to grace. So, let me ask you this question. Are your spiritual practices drawing you closer to God, or are you quietly building a monument to yourself? There is an unsettling irony at the heart of the spiritual life. The more earnestly we strive for holiness, the more vulnerable we are to become victims of spiritual pride. Those who pour themselves into prayer, fasting, and acts of service find, to their dismay, that their devotion is accompanied by this creeping sense of self-satisfaction. They begin their journey truly hungry for God, but somewhere along the way, the hunger shifts. It becomes a hunger for approval, for admiration, for the comforting belief that they are righteous. This pride distorts spiritual growth, turning it into a competition, a performance, a series of achievements, rather than a journey towards surrender. Instead of seeing themselves as undeserving recipients of grace, these individuals begin to believe that they are worthy of admiration for their own virtue. Now, I believe that this paradox is somewhat similar to what psychologists call the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias in which those with limited competence overestimate their own abilities. A beginner filled with early enthusiasm may believe that they have mastered a skill when, in reality, they have only scratched the surface. St. John observes the same pattern in spiritual life. Those who are new to faith or new to deeper devotion may mistake outward acts of piety for inward transformation. As he says, They condemn others in their hearts when they see that they do not have the same kind of devotion which they themselves desire. But true wisdom, true holiness, true humility, these come not from achieving more, but from realizing how little we truly know and how much we still need grace. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, what is that? Well, in 1995, a man named MacArthur Wheeler attempted to rob two banks in Pittsburgh. He walked in, fully confident, made his demands, and looked straight at the security cameras. Hours later, he was arrested with ease. And when he was shown the surveillance footage, he was stunned. "But I wore the lemon juice," he muttered. See, Wheeler had read that lemon juice could be used for invisible ink. From this, he deducted that smearing his face with lemon juice would make him invisible to cameras. To test his theory, he even took a Polaroid picture of himself, though either he didn't understand the device and the development of the film, or he just misframed the image. Anyways, he looked at the picture, he didn't see himself in it, and he thought, "Eureka, I could be invisible." Convinced of his success, he proceeded with his plan, completely unaware of his own mistake. Now, this story caught the attention of psychologist David Dunning, who, along with his student Justin Kruger, studied the phenomenon of overcompetence in the incompetent. Their research led to what is now known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, the tendency for people who know little to believe they know much, blind to their own ignorance. Now, spiritual pride operates in the same way. Like Wheeler and his lemon juice, those caught in spiritual pride believe that they are hidden, immune from error, cloaked in righteousness. They fast, they pray, they serve, and in doing so, they assume that they have reached the level of holiness that makes them superior to others. But their confidence outstrips their competence. St. John of the Cross warns of this blindness. He says they have some degree of satisfaction with their works and with themselves, but mistaking their actions of devotions for true transformation. Like Wheeler, their faith in their own wisdom is the very thing that deceives them. The only cure for Wheeler's delusion was the stark reality of his arrest. And so oftentimes it is with spiritual pride. Failure, exposure, that moment of reckoning, that's what has to force the soul to see the truth. The truly humble do not seek recognition. They embrace their weakness. They allow grace to fill those empty spaces. As St. John says, the humble soul is a vessel of grace, the proud soul the barrier to its flow. So that's what St. John and what psychology says about pride. But what about the scripture? Well, we have always wrestled with pride. It's there, lurking in confidence in our own convictions. It lurks there. It strings us in the way we measure our faith against another person. It gets us in sermon when we tighten our jaw when the preacher is preaching and he hits a little too close to the bone. But we often forget about rooting this out of our own hearts, even though the scripture warns us very clearly that we have this problem. Well, the first sin of the universe? Well, this was even before Adam and Eve. It was Satan's pride, Satan and the Watchers and the angels. And he fell. Perhaps it's Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. Whatever your interpretation of those passages is, we do know that pride, arrogance, superiority, whatever it was in Satan's heart. Spiritual pride isn't just a human problem. It's the defining rebellion of the enemy himself. It's the belief that we can rise higher, that we don't need to submit, that we know better. Then in Eden, Satan lures Eve with the same temptation. You will be like gods. It's not just about the disobedience. It's the desire for that godlike wisdom, control, and self-sufficiency. Fast forward, the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11. The people say, "Let us make a name for ourselves." Not a name for God, a name for themselves. The result? Scattering, confusion, and divine opposition. Then there's King Uzziah, one of Judah's greatest kings, a military strategist, a visionary. He builds towers, strengthens the nation, wins battles. But then, 2 Chronicles 26:16, when he was strong, he grew proud to his own destruction. That's the pattern. Strength, pride, fall. If you want to see how much God hates spiritual pride, just watch Jesus interact with the Pharisees. They fasted, prayed loudly, tithed meticulously, wore scriptures literally on their forehead, and yet Jesus calls them whitewashed tombs, blind guides, sons of hell. Why? Because their righteousness was performance. They looked godly, but their hearts were proud. They prayed not to commune with God, but to be seen by men. They tithed even the nitty-gritty spices, but neglected justice and mercy. And then Jesus spoke this parable that slices through all that self-righteousness. That one about the Pharisee and the tax collector as they walk into the temple. The Pharisee stands tall and prays aloud. Meanwhile, the tax collector won't even lift his eyes. He beats his chest, whispering, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." And Jesus says, that man, the one who knew his unworthiness, he went home justified. Now, Paul, he had every reason to boast, a Hebrew of Hebrews, a Pharisee, a scholar, zealous, blameless according to the law. And then he meets Jesus. And all his religious pride is garbage. He says, "I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord." Paul saw the truth. Grace leaves no room for pride. Because if salvation is a gift, if righteousness comes from Christ alone, then what exactly are we boasting in? Further, Paul warns of other things that could bring pride. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Let the one who boasts in the Lord. Spiritual pride puffs you up, but grace humbles you. Now take a moment and ask yourself, where does pride creep into my faith? Maybe it shows up when you scan the room after you did a good deed, waiting for someone to nod in approval. Maybe it lingers in the corners of your heart when you measure your spiritual walk against somebody else's, reassuring yourself that you're further along. Or maybe it stiffens your spine when someone corrects you, making it hard to listen. St. John of the Cross suggests a cure for the pride: humility lived out through hidden service. He doesn't mean groveling or shrinking back. True humility is neither weak nor self-loathing. Instead, it's the quiet confidence to serve without the need to be seen. It's scrubbing floors with joy, not resentment. It's giving without letting the left hand know what the right hand is doing. And who showed us all this better than Jesus, the Son of God? Knowing that he came from God and was going back to God, and because he knew that, he wrapped himself in a towel, kneeling before his disciples, washing the dust from their feet. And then he said, "I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." Humility isn't a concept to grasp. It's an act to live. What does hidden service look like in your life? Maybe it's praying for someone instead of criticizing them. Maybe it's giving credit to another when you could take it for yourself. Maybe it's slipping encouragement into the cracks of someone's weary day. Maybe a little note left behind. Or a burden lifted without fanfare. The beauty of hidden service is that is that it retrains the heart. It shifts your hunger from human praise to divine joy. As Jesus said, when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. The goal isn't to perform humility. It's to practice it until it becomes a rhythm of your life, the natural movement of a heart at rest in grace. Now, any good storyteller and any good preacher would put a story right here. And I was going to put a story here, one of those warm, heartening tales about someone serving in secret, loving well, and making a difference. But here's the problem. The best stories, the best ones of humility are the ones that never get told. Because the truly humble don't leave breadcrumbs for recognition. They don't angle for a moment in the light. And maybe that's the most fitting testimony of all. There are people right now in your church, in your town, who are serving in ways that no one will notice, and that's exactly how they want it. So instead of a story, let's just pause for a moment and recognize them. The ones who sweep up after the crowd has gone home. The ones who write a check in secret. The ones who pray over names nobody else remembers. They are the quiet saints, the hands of Christ moving unseen. And God is inviting you to join them. Spiritual pride is a slippery thing, hiding even in their best intentions. But humility is not just an idea, it's a practice. So here's your challenge. Choose an act of service this week, something you can do in secret and commit to keeping it that way. Don't tell anybody. Just the whole point. Don't tell me. Don't go post it on Facebook. Don't tell anybody. So, first of all, pick something small, something nobody will see. Maybe leave money for a stranger at a gas pump or in the grocery store, or maybe write an anonymous note of encouragement, or it doesn't even have to be anonymous necessarily, but something small that somebody may say thank you for, but it's not like you're putting a big fanfare out there. Or here, cleaning up a space nobody expects you to, quietly, without seeking credit. Help a neighbor in need without drawing attention to the fact, hey, I'm helping you. Send a gift, leave groceries, meet a need. Serve behind the scenes in church, fold bulletins, mop floors, stack chairs. Something that needs to be done, but nobody really notices except for God. The point isn't the size of the act. It's the invisibility of it, because pride starts to starve in the dark. And after you've done it, okay, sit with that experience. Ask yourself, do I feel joy or frustration? True humility often brings quiet joy, but pride may chafe at the lack of recognition. And that's a discomfort in the part of the process. Ask yourself that. Did I want to tell somebody about it? Notice that impulse to be seen. It's not wrong to want acknowledgement, and it's, in certain circumstances, it's all right, but humility grows when we resist the urge to seek it out. Ask yourself finally, what did I learn about God, others, or myself? Serving in the shadows can reveal what your heart truly craves, and let it be a mirror to you. The gift of hidden service is to shift your focus. When you stop looking for applause, you start seeing the joy of serving for God's glory alone. Over time, this practice loosens up pride's grip and deepens your love for the one who served in ultimate humility. But be careful. Pride has a way of sneaking back in. Even in anonymity, you might catch yourself thinking, look how humble I am. And St. John of the Cross, and anybody can tell you, pride can disguise itself as false humility. The way to fight this, how do you fight that? Turn it outward. Pray for the other person you serve. Thank God for the chance that He gave you to give, and keep your eyes on Him, not yourself. Don't measure your worth by how much you serve. Jesus' words in Matthew 6:1 stand as a guardrail. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. The goal isn't to stockpile good deeds. It's to let your heart be reshaped. So, as we draw to a close, I have a few final thoughts and final words. The world tells us that humility is smallness, a shrinking back, a diminishing of the self. But true humility, the kind that Jesus lived, the kind that St. John of the Cross wrote about, is quiet. It's a quiet, flickering candlelight. And it's not about becoming less. It's about making space. Space for grace. Space for love. Space for God to move in ways we can't predict or control. Pride clings to recognition, to the need to be seen and acknowledged. It builds a wall around the soul, blocking the rivers of grace meant to flow freely. But humility? Humility tears down those walls. It opens the hands, softens the heart, and makes room for something bigger than the self. It doesn't say, look how worthy I am. It says, look how worthy He is. And the paradox of the gospel is that the lower we bow, the higher grace lifts us. When we finally stop striving to be enough, we discover that Christ has been enough all along. And here's the hope. Humility isn't a weight to carry. It's a freedom to step into. The more we surrender the need for recognition, the more we find joy in the hidden, in the unnoticed, in the quiet work of love. It's there, in the unseen moments of serving, in the whispered prayers, in the unnoticed kindness. It's there that we sense God's presence most clearly. Humility isn't distance from God, it's the path that draws us closer. So let me ask you, what would your life look like if you stopped reaching for recognition and started living for an audience of one? Imagine the weight lifting off your shoulders, the need to prove yourself, to impress, to be noticed. Imagine the quiet joy of serving without expectation, the deep peace of knowing your worth isn't tied to applause, but anchored in the unshakable love of God. Would your relationship shift? Would your faith grow deeper? Could you finally actually pour your love and your kindness into somebody else who may not give it back to you? Would you finally find rest in the truth that His approval is the only one that really matters, and you already got it because He loves you? So let grace flow. Let humility make space. And as you step into this week, may you find the joy that comes not in being seen, but in seeing God at work, in the hidden, in the small, the ordinary, because that is where His kingdom grows. As we bring today's conversation to a close, I want to thank you, not just for listening, but for leaning in, for setting aside time, for giving your attention, and for being willing to wrestle with something as slippery and as uncomfortable as spiritual pride. Looking inward isn't easy. Naming pride where it hides, especially those places where we least expect it, takes courage. But the fact that you're here reflecting, questioning, searching, that speaks to something deep in you, a hunger for more of God. And that hunger is God's gift to you. This week, I invite you to pick up The Dark Night of the Soul, written by St. John of the Cross. and sit with chapter 2. Let St. John of the Cross take you deeper, past surface level humility, and into the quieter work of true surrender. And as you read, commit to one small hidden act of service, something nobody else will see, something no one will praise. Next week, we turn to another struggle, spiritual avarice. What happens when we desire more knowledge, more experiences, more spiritual achievements? It's different from pride, but it leads us to hoard rather than surrender. What about when faith becomes something we try to possess instead of a relationship we trust? I'll hope you join me as we explore this next chapter of The Dark Night together, and as we lean in to cultivate a spirit of generosity in a world that tells us we never have enough. Until then, keep seeking, keep serving, and keep resting in the quiet, boundless grace of God.